Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to Copper Jacket TV. So on the same day that we found out that the Supreme Court decided not to take both Snope and Ocean State, allowing semi-auto bans and mag bans to remain in place across the country and allowing tens of millions of Americans to continue to have their rights infringed, we found out that another major case is heading up to the Supreme Court next week that could help answer these questions. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there that are just, they're angry. They've lost faith in the Supreme Court. I am one of those people who is also angry, but this is not the time to sit back. This is the time to push forward, and this case gives us the opportunity to do just that. So today, we're going to be talking about the new case heading up to the Supreme Court next week. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about what's going on here. And if you appreciate content like this that informs and advocates for your Second Amendment rights, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And I appreciate every single person who subscribes. So yesterday, after the Supreme Court decided that they were going to deny both Snope and Ocean State and allow tens of millions of Americans to continue to have their rights infringed on, that's pretty much the only thing that you could find online. People's reactions were all over the place, from frustrated to angry to losing faith in the Supreme Court altogether. But the one thing that I didn't see was people giving up. I didn't see a single person who said, well, that's it, I'm over it, I'm not going to fight anymore, I give up. Not one single person, which means we still have the numbers to continue forward. Now, as I was scrolling through all of those reactions, I saw this pop up. This is from the CRPA, and this involves Duncan v. Bonta, a case that is about to get some serious national attention. Now, because Duncan was primarily a California issue at the start, it didn't really get a lot of national attention. Yes, it did go up to the Supreme Court once before, where it was GVR'd and sent back down, but for the most part, it was Californians who were watching out for this because it really affected them directly. Now that it is going back up to the Supreme Court, it is about to get national attention because this right here is the most perfect mag ban case that has ever been before the Supreme Court. That doesn't mean that they're going to take it. It doesn't mean that it's going to be accepted right away. It doesn't mean that they're not going to conference it out 20 times just to deny it. But it doesn't mean that they're not going to take it either. Because again, like I said, this case is exactly what the Supreme Court is looking for. They would have no other excuse. I mean, kind of like Snope. Snope was a perfect case as well. But still, Duncan going up, especially after, the Supreme Court said that we might take one of these cases in the next term or two, this could be the case that they end up taking, because Duncan is a case that is complete. It is finished. It is finalized. It was determined on its merits, and it is a case that has, like I said before, already been up to the Supreme Court. Now, for those of you who don't know, Duncan is a case that challenges California's ban on magazines that can hold more than 10 rounds. It's also the case that gave California its Freedom Week. I'm sure a lot of people across the country have heard of Freedom Week, even people who have moved out of the state recently. You probably remember Freedom Week. Freedom Week was a one-week period in the state of California where people could get whatever they wanted in any capacity they wanted, thanks to an injunction that was put in place by Judge Roger T. Benitez, also known as St. Benitez in California, for that exact reason. Now, that injunction was eventually stayed. It went up to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. It eventually went up to the Supreme Court, and it was put on hold pending the outcome of Bruin. Once Bruin came out, the Supreme Court granted it, vacated the Ninth Circuit's decision, and remanded it back down to the Ninth Circuit. Now, instead of the Ninth Circuit just basically taking up the issue again post-Bruin and using the new rules and guidelines that were laid out in Bruin, they decided, you know what, we can go ahead and apply another stall tactic by sending it back down to the district court. So back down to Judge Roger Benitez. Benitez, once again, after analyzing it post-Bruin and using really the same text history and tradition methodology that was used in Bruin that he used the first time around, he decided that California's ban was unconstitutional. Again, it goes back up to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and then after everything is said and done, an en banc panel of the Ninth Circuit determined that California's ban was constitutional. That gave us this reaction from Judge Van Dyke, who actually put out a video dissent.
Hi, I'm Judge Van Dyke, and welcome to my chambers. I'm making this video as part of my opinion in the Duncan v. Bonta case. In this case, the state of California made the argument, which the majority has now accepted, that a magazine holding more than 10 rounds is just an accessory, not an arm protected by the Second Amendment's right of the people to keep and bear arms. I think anyone with a basic familiarity with firearms could show you that this attempted distinction is simply inconsistent with reality.
Now, the final decision, an incorrect, unconstitutional decision by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, found that magazines that can hold more than 10 rounds are not protected by the Second Amendment because they are not even considered arms. Now, they did this for one specific reason. They did this to get around Bruin, because if you could say that they're accessories and not arms, you don't even have to go to the next step of the Bruin analysis and look at history and tradition to find some sort of analogous regulation from the founding era that would uphold today's law. You can simply say they're accessories, California is allowed to ban them, and then move on with your day, which is exactly what the Ninth Circuit did. Now, thankfully, the CRPA decided that they were going to take this up to the Supreme Court, but they needed this law to be basically, or this opinion, to be stopped in the meantime. And thankfully, the Ninth Circuit agreed that as long as they brought this up to the Supreme Court and filed it within a specific amount of time and let them know about it, it wouldn't take effect in the state of California, which means that everything that was currently grandfathered in remains grandfathered in at this time. And since this is going to be going up to the Supreme Court next week, everything that is grandfathered in is still going to be grandfathered in. That is, unless the Supreme Court decides not to take Duncan. If the Supreme Court decides not to take Duncan, it's going to be a whole nother story in the state of California, because even things that were grandfathered in from decades ago are going to be up in the air. So even though my faith in the Supreme Court, and I know a lot of others as well, has pretty much gone right out the window, it doesn't mean that we stop. It doesn't mean that we give up. There is no give up here. We're talking about our rights. We're going to continue to push forward. We're going to continue to bring cases before the Supreme Court, and I'm going to continue to inform everybody who is willing to listen on what's going on out there. And that's what I suggest you do. You advocate, you continue to inform other people, you join groups that are pushing to have our rights restored, and we make sure that we actually become even bigger and louder than we were before, because that is the only way we're ever going to affect any change. Again, the time to simply sit back and just quit is not now. But thankfully, we have a new case, a very strong case heading up to the Supreme Court next week, and I'm really excited to see the actual petition itself and read what's in it from the CRPA. I know that the CRPA, Michelle and Associates, have some of the absolute best out there, and I have a lot of faith in them. So I'm really excited to see that. I'll bring that to you as soon as it comes out. I wanted to let you guys know about that, and I thank you all very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. You guys all have a great day.